Medyo bias yata yun, ah. Partial yata yung introduction na yun. Di ba bawal lang to be biased and partial? Impeachable offense yan. Thank you very much, Ray, for that very kind words. Babating po muna ang ating mga panauhin. Unahin ko na po yung mga panauhin natin nanggaling pa sa ibang bansa. Si Mr. Wong. Number 2, pero as Justice Palatao said, number 2 is always the best position. And Mrs. Wong, Engineer Abdullah, I understand Engineer Abdullah is the engineer who made Kuala Lumpur resilient. Kuala Lumpur was not flooded or did not suffer a deluge, unlike Manila, Ondoy, and recently Bangkok, because of Engineer Abdullah. Maybe because KL is on top of a hill rather than in the mouth of a huge river like Pasig and Marikina. No, joking. Joking man. And our number 2 of Mayor Lim, that's my friend Rudy, si Lydia Tansinsin, founding president. I really salute those institution builders like Lydia, who I understand initiated the founding of the PTC as well as the ASEAN Federation. So congratulations, Lydia. Ofi Bulaong, whom I've known way back in the UP, he's been a campus beauty even then. And one of our friends was really pursuing him. One of our friends in law, and one of the brightest in UP, engineering agad. Electronics engineers, they're the one providing the biggest growth in our economy, the BPO call center sector. But we have to worry about those 600 young women working at night. We must, like, as I tell our friends in the BPO sector, yes, this is providing us income, employment, and very precious foreign exchange earnings, but we may be sacrificing the youth, the flower of our youth. 500,000 of them are now in that sector working in unholy hours. And they said that by 2013, this number will be 1,100,000. So that's another problem. And of course, our president already said what I wanted to say. So I'm tempted to say just after this greeting, uupo na ako at magpapasalamat. And my friend, if there is a government public servant who I really admire for his dynamism and practicality, it's Severino Foliosco, former Minister of Science and Technology. The chair of the professional regulatory boards, my colleagues in the engineering profession. When I was in law school, the law school is next to the College of Engineering, and we are always awed by these engineering students carrying those slide rules. Talagang parang formidable, almost like scientists walking and passing by the law school. And perhaps if there is a group of students, law students will talk to almost on even level if they are the engineering students, because we are amazed that they stay more than 4 years. Because many of them don't pass in the regular 4-year. Eh kami naman talagang during our time, 6 years ng law eh. And then ngayon, 8 years na. So, we're a little mayabang. Hanggang yan, mayabang pa rin ang law students. But we are always owed by the engineers. And when I became president of the UP, the person I picked to assist me in physical planning and administration was Ernie Tabuhara, the dean of engineering, then made him chancellor of UP Diliman. But I'm running ahead of my team. Let me congratulate Fred and the officers for hosting this summit. I didn't even know that there was his first summit, otherwise I would have been there in 2009. When we were founded in 1979, I also led the founding of the ASEAN Law Association. At that time, the ASEAN was composed only of 5 original members. And so I visited the capitals. KL, I used to go to KL quite often. And at that time, the Filipino and the Malaysian lawyers don't even talk to each other because that was the height of our controversy over Sabah. You're claiming our property. So we're disputing that very heatedly in the same manner now that we're disputing this practice with our friends from China. But that was even more heated between Malaysian and Filipino lawyers. But when we finally concluded and organized the ASEAN Law Association, because it's composed of the bar, the bench, and the lawyers in government, you know, the controversy over Sabah, I'm not saying that that's the cause of this subsidence of the heated and the passion, no. But we start now talking to each other, and we were meeting every year, alternate capitals. And up to now, that's happening. And the ASEAN Law Association is the oldest, longest running regional bar association in the world. So I believe in this intra-regional linkages. And as you know, many think tanks, including the European Commission, has said that Asia, this is the century this is the Asian century, and the center of dynamism and innovation and prosperity is moving from the West to the East, to Asia. And we are proud to be part of that dynamic Asia. And they said that by 2025, that's only barely 13 years away, we will be contributing more than 1/4 of global output. And innovation will start here. It may not start in the Philippines, it may not start in Malaysia, but it's the center of that innovation and creativity will be China and Japan and Korea and India and Singapore perhaps, but we will follow Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, and the Philippines, I hope. So we should be happy that in this recessionary world, our region is really one of the most dynamic and still growing, while the rest are stagnating and slowing down. That means that our region is investing in talent, in human capital. And I think that is what you are trying to do. I'm tempted to extemporize because the example was set by our president then. But if I extemporize, I'll be talking for 2 hours. So I'll go to my text because I already timed this. It's only 15 minutes. But anyway, we are happy that we belong to a very dynamic region. But the secret there is also coordination and cooperation. Without that linkage, we won't bolster and strengthen and reinforce our own respective strength. And that's, I think, what you are doing, especially in a very important profession like engineering. Engineering, it's so obvious, underpins the human condition. This is the engine by which science is transformed into technology. The mechanism through which knowledge is harnessed into innovation. I read about 3 years ago that there are 3 powerful technologies that will propel this planet forward. One is information technology, and we are seeing that now. Nanotechnology, the science of the small. Neurotechnology, the study of the brains. And biotechnology. But to me, the common thread to that is engineering. The innovation and the findings and the discoveries of all these sciences and resulting to technology is on account of the engineers. And that's why they said the engineers and the creative people will be the one to inherit this earth, no longer the meek. The meek will suffer. It's the engineers with their slide rule. Or wala na nga palang slide rule. Or the surveyors no longer with their transit. Why? Why? Because the engineering is the translation of science, di ba? But yet, people don't look at engineering as on par with the mathematician, the physicist, and the chemist. As the UNESCO Director General said, engineering is regarded by people as a poor cousin of science, when in fact it is the vanguard of development and sustainable development at present. You are all familiar with the biblical story about our creation. On the first day, God let loose the lawyers, and there was chaos. On the 6th day, He let loose the engineers, and order was restored. And on the 7th day, He rested. That's the Genesis according to Angara. Our world is growing increasingly smaller. People and their ideas are now more mobile, thanks to advances in such fields as logistics, transportation, infrastructure, information and communications technology. But as the world becomes more globalized and borderless, so do its biggest problems. Last year, flooding in Thailand, we thought it's just local and parochial. No, it has disrupted global supply chains. You see how what happens in one country has chain reaction and knock-on effects globally. For cars and computers globally, so far-reaching are the impacts of such issues as climate change, disaster preparedness, abject poverty, inadequate energy access, food insecurity, and environmental degradation, that proper solutions are best attained through transnational collaboration. I attended a parliamentary meeting in Tokyo the other week, 2 weeks ago, where 35 countries were present, and we all admired the calm and the sobriety of the Japanese people when they were any country hit by those triple whammies of tsunami, earthquake, and nuclear leaks, I think would never be able to get up on its feet. And yet Japan is in the process of rehabilitation. Sure, it will take time, but there's no panic because they're probably the most disaster prepared people on earth. And that's why I went to JICA and I said, okay, I have here a plan for a disaster risk management center like what you have in Hyogo Prefecture in Kobe. After the Kobe earthquake, they set up a disaster risk management center where they train local officials and local school executives how to prepare for disaster and how to cope with it. And just the mention of disaster, the JICA head said, we will support you. Give us your proposal. We'll send a team. Disaster is one example of transnational cooperation. Without cooperating with Japan, with New Zealand, with Taiwan, with Japan, Korea, and Hawaii, we will never be able to have an early warning of disasters of typhoon. In Japan, every cell owner will get an earthquake warning because the telcos provide a warning system in their cell phones. Maybe we will never be able to match, at least in my own lifetime, that kind of preparedness for our people. But I think you engineers must now begin helping policymakers like us get that become a reality. So complex are the technical challenges posed by these issues that engineering solutions have to be interdisciplinary in approach and sustainable in implementation. Hence, the global community needs an environment where knowledge and experience in engineering can be shared and implemented as freely as possible. Free engineering service within the ASEAN and perhaps beyond the ASEAN within the APEC. I think that is our goal, and ultimately globally. The formation of an engineering partnership among Southeast Asian nations, the ASEAN, promotes that vision. Here, the free flow of services is one of the primary factors in consolidating the economies of the region into a single market and production base. Such a framework sets the stage for the intra-regional practice of engineering. Let me be parochial. Engineering in the Philippines is a very attractive career pursued by many students in the tertiary education. And according to the European survey, the Philippines has one of the largest proportion of engineers and technologists in relation to million population. Even a proportion and a ratio even larger than China's and India. That's the good news. The bad news is that only 20% of those engineers and technologists meet international standards. And that's why many of our engineers and technologists are treated as second-class engineers. And that's why when we talk of the Washington Accord, of the Bologna Accord, of the Sydney and Dublin, those are standard international benchmark that we Filipinos, whether engineers, technicians, and other professions, ought to aspire to, because that is what the globe is all about now. Highly competitive, and we're not competing against each other anymore. We're competing against other nationalities. It's now a global, borderless competition, and therefore I applaud your effort through Ray Rivera to meet the standards of the Washington Accord. Filipino engineers are almost everywhere, in construction, in oil services, in the Middle East, in the coldness of the Alaskan oil fields, even in Canada. And now, you don't believe it, even in Siberia, Filipino oil engineers are there. So as I said, although we are in great demand almost globally in construction and oil sectors and other fields, we need accreditation and recognition of our qualifications, and we need it fast because the time will not wait for us. The world will move on, and if we don't move with it, then we will be left behind. The reality is that many of our Filipino engineers still face difficulty in qualifying for international registers such as the APEC and the International Professional Engineers Register, because our basic education, primary and secondary, is short of 2 years. We're the only country in the ASEAN where we cram into a 10-year curriculum what ought to be taught over a period of 12 years. But we're doing, at least our DepEd is doing something, and I'm carrying the ball in the Senate to now initiate the so-called K plus 12, kindergarten plus 12 years of primary, elementary, and secondary school. And we ought to be able to implement this by 2016. Well, we're already implementing K this school year, and we hope to start the K 11, 12 by 2012. So we are on the way to improving our educational qualifications and put the Filipino professionals on equal footing and in a competitive basis with our colleagues. By way of conclusion, let me cite at least the 3 points. First, engineering must conform with the expectations of sustainability across different spheres. Traditionally, engineering has been the recipient, the beneficiary, the harvester of material resources, whether it's food, energy, water, minerals. Today, it must be seen and it must be employed for resource conservation and waste management. In terms of social sustainability, how can engineering facilitate quality education and healthcare, enhance the quality of life, and eradicate or at least reduce poverty in our midst? Likewise, how can the profession help speed up rapid economic growth, promote technological innovations, and boost worldwide commerce? The second point is engineering must help address a major global phenomenon, urbanization. Almost half of the population of the world, 7 billion, now lives in urban, huge metropolitan areas like Manila. Many of you, or some of you, sometimes take the helicopter going south or north. You will see the congestion and the unplanned growth of our Metro Manila and suburbs. And I really, you can just imagine if just one major disaster or two of the disasters that hit Japan will hit this area. I really look at what happened to Cagayan de Oro and to Iligan. And the post-disaster death and destruction is still ongoing because of the diseases. So this is a product of urbanization, and I think engineers have a special obligation to society to help make our country more resilient, especially Manila, which is below sea level, I understand, and right smack into an earthquake zone. Thirdly, engineering will remain in the forefront of creation and invention, especially in energy, materials, bioengineering, information and systems. And in this regard, nanotechnology and bio-nanotechnology will be critical in revolutionizing how we build, in making new materials, in making environment-friendly materials through bio-nanotechnology. Meanwhile, cleaner and greener energy systems is clearly the future of power generation. The Philippines is quite fortunate because if we exploit and develop our renewable resources in this country, we can replace all our imported crude oil and make our country cleaner and greener and our people healthier. But it takes some political will to do that and time. But the engineers can expedite and facilitate the process, especially in renewable energy. Engineering is also making computing more powerful and opening up mass access to high-tech portable information and interconnection. Bioengineering, for instance, the combination of engineering, biology, and medicine, highlights the increasingly interdisciplinary nature of your profession. But come to think of it, almost all professions now ought to be interdisciplinary. All studies must now become interdisciplinary to become sustainable. And finally, our biggest challenge in the coming years, to me, is climate change because it's so unpredictable. Now we see typhoon in Mindanao, which was quite unheard of before. We see massive flooding, as we saw in Cagayan de Oro and Iligan. Before that, in central Mindanao and parts of Davao provinces. So no place now is safe from disaster. And that's why I said I'm going to put emphasis on disaster risk management for one. And then I will encourage through the COMSTE, or Congressional Committee on Science, Technology, and Engineering, which I had in Congress, to focus on how we can cope with climate change. I don't think, again, in my lifetime, we'll be able to do it. But geoengineering in other areas are able to come up now with direct climate, with direct carbon reduction, by building artificial trees, by encouraging people to plant more trees, because that's a natural carbon capture and deposit system. We don't need to spend billions. It's so easy. And now geoengineers are thinking of how to build even a stratosphere shield. They will shield the ultraviolet so that, Mount Pinatubo, when it's erupted, it lowered the temperature of the planet by 1 degree Fahrenheit. It's the same principle. If they can shield us from the suns, then we will lower the temperature and there will be less carbon dioxide emission. But that may be still far off. But what is now practicable and feasible, and they're trying it, is sulfur spraying. Sulfur spraying of the atmosphere. But again, we don't know what will happen. What is the side effect of sulfur? Si Miss Bulang, she's a top chemist. Maybe she can tell us the side effect spraying sulfur into the atmosphere. But I'm just suggesting that there are engineering solutions to many of the problems we are now encountering. It just takes a little time and a little inventiveness and creativity, and I have no doubt that you can provide it. And again, let me cite UNESCO, as UNESCO predicted and forecast. Engineering is absolutely essential to our survival and to our development. And the key there is how we can develop, how you engineers can develop a method, a mechanism for sustainable development responsive to the human condition. So on that note, let me end and wish you a very successful conference. Salamat po.
Thank you very much, Senator Angara. At this point, I'd like to call on Engineer Fred Ramsada, President of the Philippine Technological Council, to present the token of appreciation for our keynote speaker tonight. May I call on Senator Angara back on the stage? Can I